Arrest her if she can't come up with 20 grand in the next 5 minutes. That was the outrageous order our HOA president, Karen, barked at a group of police officers. All because my wife wouldn't hand over payment for some ridiculous violation fee Karen had dreamed up right there in our front yard, with neighbors looking on. Karen wore a smug grin, convinced she had backed my wife into a corner. What she didn't realize was that she had just challenged the wrong person. Rachel didn't flinch. She simply straightened the badge clipped to her belt and said coolly, "We'll handle this by the book." My book. What followed silenced the entire neighborhood, and it was nothing like the scene Karen had imagined. Let me rewind to where this all began. It was the annual Maplewood Shore Summer Festival, one of those picture-perfect suburban gatherings that remind you why you moved to a quiet neighborhood in the first place. Kids darted around with painted faces and sticky fingers from cotton candy. Local bands tuned up on the temporary stage. The smell of sizzling burgers drifted through the air. I was working the charity food booth, flipping patties for the local food bank, when I spotted Rachel deep in conversation with Linda Carver, better known to just about everyone as Karina, near the HOA information table. Linda, at 52, had perfected her role as the self-proclaimed queen bee of the neighborhood. Years of moderating Facebook community groups had given her a false sense of authority, and the presidency of the HOA only amplified it. Rachel, on the other hand, was keeping a low profile. She'd just been appointed chief of police for Maplewood Shores the week before, but we hadn't made it public yet, for security reasons. The official announcement was set for Monday. She wore an unusually heavy jacket for the summer heat, which I'd noticed but didn't question. After 12 years specializing in financial crimes, Rachel knew how quickly things could get out of hand when someone's sense of power was threatened. Karen was holding what looked like an official document, gesturing with exaggerated flair. I could see Rachel's polite posture shifting into the sharper stance of a professional picking apart a story. Then Karen unveiled her big reveal, a so-called emergency assessment requiring every household to cough up $20,000 within 48 hours to pay for a security system upgrade. She presented it with the confidence of someone used to getting their way. Rachel calmly asked for meeting minutes and voting records proving the HOA had followed proper procedure. She even pointed out that Karen hadn't given the legally required notice or gathered enough votes to approve such a large expense. Karen's expression hardened. Instead of providing proof, she pulled from her leather portfolio what she claimed was a court-approved resolution, complete with official-looking seals and a judge's signature. She spoke as though she were delivering an unshakable verdict, dropping hints about her connections in the judicial system and making it sound as if resisting her was pointless. Rachel stayed composed, but I saw her hand hover near her belt, a familiar tell after years of marriage. The tension was thick enough to cut when 17-year-old Tyler Brooks, whose dad ran the local convenience store, started filming on his phone. Tyler had a nose for drama, and this was gold for social media. As more neighbors noticed the standoff, Karen's voice grew louder, feeding off the crowd. Then came her next theatrical move. She called 911. Claiming Rachel was being disruptive and trespassing after refusing to obey legal court orders. She painted herself as a noble community leader under threat, spinning the tale like she was auditioning for an award. Minutes later, sirens blared. 2 patrol cars rolled up, and out stepped officers Jake Sullivan and Maria Santos, both fairly new to the Maplewood Shores force. Santos had transferred in only 2 weeks earlier. They had no clue they were walking into a neighborhood power struggle in full swing. Karen hurried toward them, clutching her folder like it was sacred evidence. By now, festival music had stopped, and our dispute was the main event. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Karen declared, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "This woman has been threatening me and refusing to comply with legal orders. I want her arrested immediately." She waved her documents like a victory flag, certain her influence would win the day. But Rachel remained still, her expression calm, eyes fixed on Karen with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the tide was about to turn. Karen launched into her story again for the officers, throwing in more dramatic flourishes about Rachel's supposed crimes. Tyler's phone kept recording. The crowd pressed closer. Karen, convinced she'd pulled the ultimate power play, was about to learn that the person she'd tried to intimidate was not the sort of opponent you catch off guard. Rachel stayed by the HOA information table, hands relaxed at her sides, watching Karen's performance with the patience of someone who had seen this sort of thing play out before. The cheerful summer festival atmosphere had completely shifted. Gone was the light-hearted music and laughter. Now it felt more like a tense courtroom drama staged on the community center lawn. The local band had stopped their sound check. Parents quietly steered their kids to safer spots. And Tyler Brooks, still glued to his phone, had moved in for an even better angle. His live stream audience had swelled to 500. With comments pouring in from viewers who clearly recognized the classic signs of an HOA power trip. The silence from the festival loudspeakers only heightened the drama. Karen looked absolutely certain she was moments away from a public victory. Officer Sullivan, a 10-year veteran, listened to her rapid-fire accusations with a skeptical look. Officer Santos, new to the department after a transfer from the neighboring county, jotted notes while carefully scanning everyone's expressions and movements. Karen flourished her paperwork of violation notices and legal threats, each stamped with what appeared to be official court seals and signatures. To an untrained eye, the documents looked convincing, complete with legal jargon and case numbers. She explained that these were not mere HOA rules but actual court orders signed by retired Judge Harold Whitman, who, according to her, was personally overseeing the matter. Her delivery was pure theatre, dramatic pauses, confident gestures, and the air of someone convinced she had the upper hand. That confidence wavered slightly when Sullivan asked the inevitable, "Ma'am, what's the probable cause for an arrest? Exactly what crime do you believe has been committed?" Without missing a beat, Karen claimed Rachel was in contempt for refusing to pay court-ordered fines, guilty of disorderly conduct for her threatening behavior, and trespassing on community property by being at the festival while in violation. It was a creative stretch of the law that might have worked on someone who didn't actually understand legal procedure. That's when I stepped forward, keeping my hands visible and my tone steady. "Officers, I think there's some misunderstanding about the nature of those documents and the authority they carry." Karen spun around, her face flushing. "This is a matter for law enforcement now, sir. I suggest you step aside and let them handle it." Her tone carried the smugness of someone certain the presence of police meant she had already won. Rachel caught my eye and gave a barely noticeable nod, one of those tiny signals between us that meant she was ready to tip the balance. She just needed the right moment. Santos leaned towards Rachel. "Ma'am, where were you working before moving here?" Rachel answered smoothly, 12 years in the county, recently promoted to a new local position. I noticed Karen's expression falter. Something in that answer didn't sit right with her. She kept glancing at her watch and checking her phone, as if waiting for some backup plan that was slow to arrive. The festival crowd had grown thicker, neighbors angling for a better view of what had now become the afternoon's main entertainment. Sensing her moment slipping away, Karen decided to go all in. She turned to both officers, raised her voice for maximum audience impact, and declared, "I'm giving this woman exactly 5 minutes to provide $20,000 in cash or a certified check, or I'll demand she be arrested for violating court orders, disorderly conduct, and trespassing on HOA property." Pulling out her phone, she tapped a timer app with exaggerated flourish, holding it up for everyone to see. The crowd fell silent. Tyler's livestream had surpassed 2,000 viewers. Comments scrolling too fast to read. A few recognized Rachel and were asking pointed questions Tyler couldn't answer. Karen was certain she had delivered her checkmate move. Rachel simply smiled faintly. "I think it's best we clarify proper procedures first," she said evenly. Karen ignored her, calling out each milestone like a carnival barker running an execution countdown. 4 minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Parents kept their kids at a distance, but the rest of the adults stayed locked on the scene, the only background noise coming from distant carnival games and hushed whispers among stunned neighbors. Instead of looking panicked, Rachel's calm only deepened. "I do appreciate your concern for a legal process, Mrs. Carver," she said, her polite professionalism making Karen's grand show seem all the more absurd. "But I think we should be sure we're following the correct protocols before any enforcement takes place." Even Officer Sullivan paused mid-note, giving Rachel a more focused look. There was a certain quiet certainty in her manner that hinted she was holding back something significant, to something that could turn the entire standoff upside down if revealed at the right moment. "Sullivan, seasoned enough to trust his instincts, stepped closer to Karen. "Ma'am, before we move forward with any arrest, I need to verify the probable cause and the authenticity of these court orders." Karen eagerly passed over her folder, convinced that closer inspection would only strengthen her position. But as Sullivan examined the papers, his expression shifted. He'd seen his share of forgeries, and the signs were there. A court seal with blurred edges suggesting it had been scanned and reprinted, registration marks misaligned with official formats, and, most telling, date stamps clumsily altered with whiteout and pen, something no legitimate court document would ever bear. When Sullivan pointed out the irregularities, Karen's confident facade began to falter, though she clung to her combative stance. "Those documents are completely valid, signed by Judge Harold Whitman himself," she snapped, her voice climbing in pitch. "He's been personally overseeing this matter because it's vital to community safety and property values." Her insistence only raised more questions. "If that's true," Sullivan asked, "why would a judge overseeing an active case use a scanned copy of his seal instead of applying it to the original documents?" Karen's reply was her first serious misstep. Instead of answering, she became defensive. "Are you accusing me of forging legal documents? Do you have any idea who you are dealing with?" She jabbed at her phone screen, dialing a number from memory. "Harold, they're refusing to cooperate with the court orders. You need to deal with this immediately." Her side of the conversation was short, peppered with complaints about the police and demands for immediate action. While Karen was distracted, Rachel addressed Sullivan in a calm, measured tone. "Officer, before any enforcement is considered, perhaps dispatch could confirm the validity of these orders and the current status of Judge Whitman's authority. As far as I'm aware, he retired several months ago." The suggestion was delivered with the professional courtesy of someone who knew the proper investigative process inside and out. Sullivan didn't need more than a glance to understand the weight of her request. By now, nearly the entire neighborhood had gathered. Tyler's livestream had exploded to more than 15,000 viewers, the comments flying by so fast they were unreadable. A few people online seemed to recognize Rachel, asking variations of, "Is that who I think it is? And Bill Brokenbar isn't Shay Brokenbar?" At the edge of the crowd, Dorothy Fleming, our oldest resident, stood clutching a cardboard box, her gaze fixed on Rachel. She seemed to be waiting for her moment, as if she carried information that could tip the scales even further. Karen's self-imposed 5-minute countdown had reached 2 minutes, and she was clearly irritated that the officers weren't moving to arrest Rachel. "Time is almost up," she barked for all to hear. "This woman needs to produce $20,000 right now or face the legal consequences." Rachel's response was deliberate, as slowly unzipping her heavy summer jacket while Sullivan's radio crackled to life. "Unit 7, dispatch said clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Be advised, Judge Harold Whitman's official seal was revoked and collected upon his retirement 6 months ago. Any documents bearing the seal dated after his retirement are fraudulent." The crowd went still. Karen's color drained. Rachel's jacket came open, and what she revealed underneath shifted the scene entirely. She reached for her belt, pulled out her badge, and looked Sullivan in the eye. "I think it's time we make clear exactly who has jurisdiction here." The afternoon sun caught the metal in her hand, the unmistakable badge of a police chief. Rachel handed over her credentials, which bore the official seal of the Maplewood Shores Police Department. "I'm Rachel Moore, Chief of Police, appointed last week." Without breaking eye contact, she spoke into her radio. "Dispatch, this is Chief Moore, badge number 774. Please confirm my ID and current status." The reply was instant. "Chief Moore, ID confirmed. We've been waiting for your first official call." The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Sullivan and Santos straightened at once, offering crisp salutes. Karen stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, while the timer on her phone continued to run, and now just under 2 minutes. But her once powerful ultimatum had lost all meaning. What had seemed like an unshakable ultimatum only minutes earlier now looked absurd in light of Rachel's authority. The festival crowd was utterly silent. Even the sounds from the carnival games in the distance felt muted. Word was spreading fast. Maplewood Shores' brand new police chief had just been threatened with arrest by the HOA president herself. "Thank you, officers," Rachel said with the calm assurance of someone used to taking charge. Let's proceed according to proper procedure, starting with a full review of these potentially fraudulent documents. She motioned toward Karen's folder, which suddenly seemed far less intimidating than before. I'm requesting temporary seizure of all documents and electronic devices connected to this matter under exigent circumstances, pending a formal investigation. The measured weight in her voice left no doubt she was speaking from a place of legal authority. Sullivan and Santos knew instantly this was no longer just a neighborhood spat. It was the beginning of a criminal case. The mood in the crowd shifted. Neighbors who had been tense moments earlier now leaned in with a mix of fascination and disbelief. Tyler Brooks's live stream was exploding, his audience climbing beyond 15,000. The comments were coming in too fast to read, some asking if Rachel was the same person from the Financial Crimes Unit, others speculating about what this meant for Karen's future. Then, at last, Dorothy Fleming stepped forward. She'd been waiting patiently on the edge of the gathering, clutching a large cardboard box like it contained treasure. Moving deliberately, she approached Rachel. "Chief Moore," Dorothy said, her tone respectful but purposeful, "I believe I have something that will assist in your investigation." The box was packed with neatly organized photocopies and handwritten notes of 5 years' worth of HOA records. "I've kept copies of all meeting minutes, correspondence, and financial statements since Mrs. Carver took over," Dorothy explained. "There have been a broken bar inconsistencies, unauthorized spending, missing quorum approvals, transfers that don't match the financial reports she's given residents." Rachel's eyes sharpened as she began sorting through the contents. Years in financial crime investigation had trained her to spot patterns quickly, and she didn't have to look long. The evidence was damning. Irregular transfers from the HOA's account to something called Maplewood Security Solutions, a company with no listed business address. Receipts showed pool construction materials charged to the emergency repair budget. And then came the worst of Ida bank statements proving $75,000 had been funneled from the HOA reserve into Karen's personal accounts over just 3 months. The withdrawals were labeled with vague excuses like emergency consulting and temporary operational loan, but there was no record of any legitimate emergency. Rachel kept her voice even. "Mrs. Carver, can you explain the purpose and authorization for these transfers from the HOA's emergency fund to your accounts?" Karen stammered through a weak explanation about short-term loans for community projects and promised to pay everything back with interest. But the more she spoke, the more obvious it became she had no real defense. Around us, neighbors began murmuring their own stories and unexpected fees, suspicious assessments, threats of legal action if payments weren't made. Rachel knew it was time to move from suspicion to action. "Mrs. Carver," she said firmly, "I am placing a temporary hold on all of your electronic devices and financial records pending a full investigation into potential fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty." She turned to Sullivan and Santos. "We'll need her phone, laptop, and any devices that could contain financial data." The officers immediately began moving to secure the evidence. Karen bristled. "I will not allow myself to be humiliated like this. I'm calling my lawyer." She yanked out her phone. Karen's hands trembled as she fumbled through her contacts, her phone screen blurring from her unsteady grip. "I'm calling my attorney right now," she declared loudly enough for both the gathered crowd and Tyler's streaming audience to hear. "Harold Whitman will put an end to this harassment once and for all." The call connected on the second ring, and without hesitation, Karen switched to speakerphone, her voice brimming with the false confidence of someone certain their reinforcements were about to arrive. "Harold, thank goodness you picked up. These people are harassing me, refusing to acknowledge your authority. The new police chief is trying to bully me into withdrawing legitimate court orders." Her tone carried the same practiced blend of indignation and victimhood she perfected in years of home meetings, though beneath it, the first cracks of unease had begun to show. On the other end, Whitman's voice rolled out with the smooth confidence of a man used to bending situations with legal jargon and veiled threats. "Chief Moore, I assume, this is Harold Whitman, counsel for Mrs. Carver and several other respected community groups in the area. Any interference with lawfully executed court orders could have serious consequences for you personally, and for the city you represent." He spoke like someone accustomed to seeing law enforcement retreat in the face of his threats. Yet, There was something in Rachel's calm that seemed to disturb his rhythm, even over the phone. Rachel's reply was polite but carried the precision of someone who had dealt with intimidating attorneys for more than a decade. "Mr. Whitman, before we proceed, could you confirm your current state bar number and verify your license to practice in this jurisdiction? I'd also like to authenticate the court orders you've mentioned, especially since our dispatch confirms your official seal was revoked upon your retirement." Her request landed like a quiet challenge. The pause on the line was telling. Whitman's certainty wavered as he launched into a convoluted explanation about serving in an advisory capacity and claiming his emeritus status allowed him to offer legal guidance. He danced around the direct question of whether he was still authorized to practice law. Meanwhile, Tyler's chat feed erupted. Viewers recognized Whitman's name, posting accusations of corruption probes and a forced retirement. Tyler's voice cut through the tension. Someone in the chat says they worked at the courthouse. Apparently Judge Whitman was forced out last year for taking bribes and selling court decisions. The color drained from Karen's face as the weight of her so-called ally's reputation hit her. Rachel didn't waste the moment. "Mr. Whitman, given these allegations, I'll need documented proof of your current legal authority before recognizing any documents with your name or seal." Her words were firm, professional, and, in front of hundreds of neighbors and thousands of online viewers, a clear dismantling of his bluff. The crowd had swelled as the news rippled through the neighborhood. Quietly, I had been texting former law enforcement colleagues to run a background check on Whitman. The reply came quickly and it was damning. Whitman had indeed been pushed into early retirement after a state-level corruption investigation and was now under federal investigation for racketeering and money laundering. I passed the information to Rachel, who absorbed it with a grim nod. Karen's phone would turn out to be the keystone of the entire case. 6 months of text messages between her and Whitman revealed meticulous planning for something they called the Community Fundraising Initiative. Attached were photos of official seals and signatures Whitman had stockpiled before his retirement as tools for fabricating fraudulent court orders. Even more incriminating was a spreadsheet listing 47 local households, complete with projected contributions and deadlines. Emails showed this wasn't confined to Maplewood Shore, as they had blueprints to roll out the scam across 15 other HOAs statewide, estimating $5 million in revenue over 2 years. Their strategy was to demand fake emergency assessments backed by forged legal orders, banking on most homeowners being too intimidated to fight back. Rachel's voice carried over the stunned festival crowd. "This isn't just HOA politics or overreach. This is an organized criminal operation involving forged documents, judicial impersonation, and potential federal racketeering charges." The neighborhood's reaction was electric, a mix of outrage and vindication. Long-simmering grievances over suspicious fees and unexplained assessments suddenly made sense as part of a larger con. Karen's only response was to abruptly hang up on Whitman and make a break for the parking area, where her Mercedes was waiting. But she hadn't accounted for the way a crowd had instinctively tightened around the confrontation, their bodies forming a living barrier between her and any hope of escape. Karen found herself hemmed in by curious and wary neighbors, their eyes following her every move. Rachel took a steady breath and issued the order that would push the situation into higher gear. "Dispatch, this is Chief Moore," she said evenly. "Connect me with the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit and Internal Affairs. We have probable cause for organized fraud involving forged legal documents and impersonation of judicial authority." Her voice was calm and controlled, but the meaning was unmistakable. Karen, realizing her time to flee was slipping away, suddenly bolted toward the parking lot, clutching her purse and phone as though they were her lifeline. But her luxury car was boxed in by festival traffic and parked vehicles. The cheerful layout of the neighborhood event had become an accidental barricade. The arrival of Detective Sarah Martinez from the Attorney General's office transformed the festive atmosphere into something resembling an active crime scene. Stepping out of an unmarked sedan, Martinez moved with the no-nonsense precision of a veteran investigator of high-value fraud cases. Sunlight caught the badge clipped to her belt as she scanned the scene. Right behind her came James Chen from Internal Affairs, a clear signal that this matter was now operating at a level far above small-town disputes. Rachel stood by the festival's information table, surrounded by neatly labeled boxes of evidence, her posture shifting from community member to seasoned police chief. Her briefing to the arriving team was crisp and methodical, outlining a network of fraudulent activity spanning multiple homeowners associations. Watching her work, I felt a surge of pride and awe. The woman I'd married, who had spent over a decade painstakingly building her reputation in financial crimes, was fully in her element. I reached out and gave her arm a gentle squeeze, murmuring, "You're the chief because you do what's right." The search of Karen's vehicle revealed more than anyone expected: 3 laptops, several USB drives, and an extensive filing system. Each folder was disturbingly meticulous: resident lists, bank statements, and vulnerability reports assessing which neighborhoods would be easiest to pressure with fabricated emergencies. Karen, now cornered, locked herself in her car. Her phone was glued to her ear as she made rapid calls and fired off messages, either warning her co-conspirators or scrambling to salvage the operation. The shift from arrogance to desperation was unmistakable, but the most incriminating find came from one of Whitman's laptops, inexplicably in Karen's possession. It contained a comprehensive blueprint for a multi-state fraud ring. Emails detailed how Maplewood Shores was meant to be a small-scale trial before moving to wealthier communities with even greater profit potential. Meanwhile, Tyler Brooks's livestream was attracting tens of thousands of viewers, many of whom claimed to recognize similar suspicious HOA practices in their own states, hinting the scheme could be far bigger than suspected. Then came the decisive break: encrypted files on the USB drive holding a parallel accounting system. It mapped out exactly how the stolen money was funneled through shell corporations and cryptocurrency accounts before vanishing into doomed investments. The records were so precise they could have been written for prosecutors. Karen's last show of defiance was to lower her window just enough to shout threats about her political connections and the lawsuits she'd unleash. But the words rang hollow. With the mountain of evidence now in official hands, her bluster was little more than noise. Detective Martinez stepped toward the car, her expression making it clear the standoff was over. Detective Martinez approached Karen's vehicle with the steady patience of someone who had seen many desperate suspects before. She calmly offered Karen a chance to cooperate, the kind of cooperation that could weigh in her favor during sentencing. The community's reaction to the revelations was a volatile mix of relief and outrage. Neighbors finally saw the full scale of the manipulation they had endured. Much of the case's foundation came from Mrs. Fleming's quiet dedication over 5 years, meticulously documenting questionable HOA actions that, without her diligence, might have gone on unchecked indefinitely. Residents began coming forward with their own stories: unexplained fees, dubious emergency assessments, each one now crucial evidence in what had become a federal investigation. Karen's true collapse began with a mistake that was almost too absurd to believe. While frantically trying to delete incriminating messages on her phone, she accidentally activated Facebook Live. For 12 long minutes, over 200 of her friends and contacts watched as she scrambled to erase evidence and made frantic calls to her co-conspirators. The comment section erupted, a chaotic stream of shock, disbelief, and grim satisfaction as people witnessed her downfall in real time. Officer Santusa, the very same officer Karen had once tried to pressure into arresting Rachel, now stood at her door, reading her Miranda rights. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. When Karen finally emerged from her car, her face showed the unmistakable look of someone who knew her entire empire had collapsed. Among the most damning pieces of evidence were spreadsheets detailing how she and Whitman had planned to silence anyone who threatened their scheme. These files revealed a calculated, organized criminal mindset, one that went far beyond simple financial fraud. Email exchanges suggested they had even considered ways to remove problematic residents entirely, a chilling sign of how far the operation could have gone if left unchecked. As she was led away in handcuffs, Karen paused and looked directly at Rachel. Her voice was stripped of arrogance, replaced with a bitter edge. "You think you've won," she said. "But you don't know how big this is. There are people you haven't found, consequences you can't imagine." Her words hinted that the arrest was only the beginning. 3 days later, facing an overwhelming stack of federal charges, Karen finally broke. In a stark FBI interrogation room, She revealed the existence of a network spanning 23 homeowner associations in 4 states. At the center of it all was Heritage Legal Solutions, a fake law firm operating out of Atlanta that specialized in manufacturing official-looking documents for criminal clients. The scale was staggering, over $2 million a year in fraudulent emergency assessments, with plans to target wealthy retirement communities in Florida and California, where elderly residents could be more easily pressured through legal intimidation. Each community had been thoroughly profiled, with reports on demographics, income levels, and the likelihood of residents challenging suspicious HOA actions. Her cooperation sparked a multi-state Operation A, Operation Clean Neighborhood A, involving FBI field offices across 5 states. The results came quickly: 15 simultaneous property raids and the seizure of more than $4 million in stolen assets accumulated over just 3 years. The sentences reflected the severity of the crimes. Karen was given 5 years in federal prison, ordered to repay $340,000 to the communities she defrauded, and permanently barred from any role in an HOA. Whitman's punishment was harsher: 7 years behind bars, the loss of his judicial pension, and permanent disbarment. But the most unsettling detail came in Karen's final debriefing. Looking squarely at the FBI agents, she said without hesitation, "You think we were just stealing from HOAs? We were selling detailed personal information about thousands of families, financial records, social security numbers, daily schedules, even home security codes. Everything we needed was sitting right there in HOA files, and people trusted us with it." In the wake of her arrest, Maplewood Shores began to breathe again. It felt as if the community had been holding its breath for years. Dorothy Fleming was elected the new HOA president in a record-breaking special election. Her campaign built on one clear promise: total financial transparency and accountability. Dorothy Fleming's leadership message struck a chord with residents who vowed never to fall prey to such schemes again. The money recovered from Karen's accounts became the seed for unprecedented improvements that would reshape Maplewood Shores into a neighborhood admired and studied by others. From the $280,000 reclaimed, the community built a state-of-the-art playground designed with top safety measures and full accessibility for children with disabilities, a modern community center offering meeting rooms and educational programs for all ages, and a special fund to help elderly residents with home repairs and medical needs. Rachel's steady leadership throughout the crisis earned her the community's full trust. She was formally introduced as the town's police chief in a ceremony that drew crowds from nearby areas and attracted media coverage showcasing Maplewood Shores as a shining example of transparent, community-focused policing. Her emphasis on openness, resident involvement, and crime prevention began influencing other small-town police departments across the region. Perhaps the most symbolic transformation came when the HOA purchased Karen's former home at a steep discount during the asset forfeiture process. It was converted into the Maplewood Community Legal Education Center, a free resource for workshops on consumer rights, HOA governance, and fraud prevention, serving residents from across the region. Even Karen's unfinished swimming pool was repurposed into a public community pool, now a centerpiece of summer activities. What had once been a private monument to greed became a place where families gathered for parties, children learned to swim, and neighbors built lasting connections. Meanwhile, Tyler Brooks turned his viral live stream coverage of the investigation into a legitimate journalism career, receiving internship offers from major outlets and amassing over 50,000 followers who valued his respectful, human-centered storytelling. His documentation of the HOA scandal became a teaching case in journalism schools, illustrating how social media could responsibly expose corruption and hold power to account. Maplewood Shores' transformation extended far beyond the satisfaction of seeing justice served. The town became known for genuine civic engagement, transparent governance, and neighborly solidarity. Property values rose sharply, but more importantly, residents took an active role in protecting one another and ensuring their community's well-being. 6 months after Karen's sentencing, Rachel received a call that made it clear the story wasn't over. "Chief Moore, this is Special Agent Rebecca Thompson from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. We need your help." The network Karen revealed was only the beginning. "We've uncovered similar operations in 12 more states, and this time, They've learned from her mistakes. They're covering their tracks. It was a sobering reminder. The fight against HOA fraud was far from over. Our community's experience and Rachel's skill in uncovering financial crimes made us a key ally in a broader national effort to protect vulnerable neighborhoods. Looking back, it's hard to believe that a simple neighborhood festival became the turning point that unraveled a criminal web victimizing thousands of families across multiple states. The greatest lesson was clear, as some of the most important battles for justice happen close to home. Ordinary people, united and unwilling to be silenced, can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to let those in power abuse their positions. For those living under HOA governance, vigilance is essential. Beware of sudden emergency assessments, denial of access to financial records, legal intimidation of questioning residents, and hasty decisions made without proper notice. Your constitutional rights don't disappear under HOA bylaws. Leadership exists to serve, not to rule, and it is every citizen's duty to hold them accountable. Our story is proof. If you've ever been wronged by a community authority, you're not alone. Change is possible, justice is possible, and sometimes, the fight is just getting started.